It might sound crazy, but with how well he's playing, should the Pelicans actually trade Zion Williamson this offseason? I'll explain why it could make sense, but also the pitfalls of it in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with you on this Thursday, game day for your Pelicans as they're taking on the Orlando Magic. We will, of course, recap that in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. But in today, I want to look at trading Zion Williamson. He's playing exceptionally good basketball recently. Is it time to maybe strike while the iron's hot, get the most value in return for him? But also the problems with that, and the value might not be as high as you think. We're going to cover all that and more in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast, coming to you like nobody else does. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So in literally like yesterday's show, I was like, I don't know if this is what we're going to do on Thursday, but decided it is what I wanted to do on Thursday because I actually think this is an interesting discussion. And I think there's a couple elements with trading or not trading Zion Williamson away that people are not factoring in. And that's going to be a big deal with, the Pelicans deciding what they want to do. So it took me a little bit to figure this show out. Hence why it's a little bit late today in this. But we're going to get into it. And I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. So let's start with trading Zion Williamson and why you would do this. It's simple, right? There's a couple of reasons why. He's never been healthy consistently. And while he's playing well now, playing exceptionally well now, he's playing the best basketball of his career. That is without a doubt for all of us. He also missed how many games this season? He's missed how many games in the past? So yes, this is a very great stretch, but is this exactly the type of Zion we're going to see going forward or not? And every time we've been here before, and we have been here before, this is someone who gets you hyped up. We kind of buy in, and then you get let down from it, essentially. And this is just the cycle. It's a merry-go-round. It's a roller coaster that we've been on. And is it time to just, maybe get off said roller coaster because, frankly, it's exhausting? And the answer to that could be yes, right? Like, it's one of those things of like, is this any way to live? And that's a little bit over dramatic. Don't get me wrong. But you get the point that I'm trying to make here of like, it might be nice just to, not deal with this anymore. And if you're trying to kind of plot a course for a franchise, can you do it when someone's as inconsistent as he has been in terms of health and things like that? And the answer to that is probably no. Look, you would essentially be shorting Zion Williamson's stock. Similar to what the Dallas Mavericks, not even the Dallas Mavericks, but just Nico Harrison kind of did with Luka Doncic. It's just, we don't believe in this. We're worried about some stuff in the future. Let's get ahead of this now and get out from under this so that it's not going to cripple us in a couple of years. You'd be shorting Zion Williamson. I think there's more of a reason to short Zion Williamson than there would be Luka Doncic. There's more of a reason to believe that the injuries and things like that for Zion Williamson are greater than that of Luka Doncic. So the Pelicans would be entirely justified, in my opinion, trading him for that reason alone, right? You're looking at the history and banking on that as opposed to what you might find in the future and just getting off the roller coaster and kind of the merry-go-round that we've seen before. All of that makes a ton of sense. So from that perspective, yeah, like Totally. That's exactly what you do here. Despite Zion over his last 17 games scoring 26 points per game, 5 assists, 7 rebounds, 2 triple-doubles in that mix too, and under 28 minutes per game, shooting 61% from the field. You saw him with 2 mid-range jump shot attempts the other night in the win over the Clippers too. He's playing very, very, very good basketball. It's really as simple as that. But doesn't mean he's going to be healthy next year. Doesn't mean he's going to be healthy to finish out the year. And those are the concerns that you have. The best ability is availability, and that is not something that he has shown. It's also has to do with his contract too. And this is something that the everydayers know we've talked a lot about this season in regards to Brandon Ingram. Flat out, the Pelicans held on to Brandon Ingram too long. And while I think they got about as good of a return as you could get for him, you did not maximize the return that you could have gotten had you traded him a year or two before. 2 years ago, I don't think you would have done. Last year probably was the right move, especially when we were looking at this team as just being a play-in team, though they fell from the 6th spot too, in the final week of the regular season. Keeping that in mind. They were up to 5, I think, at one point in time. So still, is it, it's trying to find the balance between winning and being competitive and making sure you get maximum value from your players. When you knew that Brandon Ingram was not going to be a long-term piece, and that was very clear for a while, should they have moved on from him well ahead of time, knowing that even if it sacrifices some competitiveness for you? And I think the answer to that could be yes. I've said, as we talked about kind of expiring deals, the best time to trade guys is literally basically like the first year of their extension, if you're allowed to. You're not always allowed to. Or the second year of their deal, right? Zion is in the second year of his extension right now. Next year will be the third year of his extension. He's got 2 years after that. He's playing as well as possible. He's got a longer time on his contract than basically anyone they would have traded. That's how you get maximum value back. Maximum value back for Zion Williamson. Every year you wait, despite how he plays, that value likely is going to go down from here just because there's fewer years left on the deal. That's less team control. Even $40 million in the current collective bargaining agreement with some of the contracts you're going to see, pretty decent overall, truthfully, for a guy that can play like this. So if that's going to be the case, get maximum value for Zion Williamson. Now, I'm going to push back on that idea because I get it, right? It shouldn't only be about value in the NBA, or at least I don't think it should be. Maybe you disagree, right? It's not just about trading players when they're at their peak so you get the best return to get more players that you then trade at their peak to get more players that are young so when they develop and are at their peak, you can trade them again. That's an endless cycle of just trying to create value. No one's a day trader here, right? We're not trying to just extract maximum value for players. You want to win. You want your fan base to have fun. You want your fan base to identify with players too, and drafted players the easiest way to do that. So I think there's something to be said for, getting maximum value if you're trading someone. If it's like we don't really want to trade Zion at any point, then just simply don't trade him and value be damned and that sort of thing if you're forced to trade him later down the line. And I think that can sometimes get lost in the conversation about, trading players, things like that. Ingram was different because they knew, and we all knew, he wasn't going to be here long term. And so if that was going to be the case, then, move on from him. But if Zion's like, we're still trying to build around this guy, we want to build around this guy, you don't trade him just because the value might be the all-time high. That takes a big risk to do something like that. Now, you've seen teams kind of blow it up and eject on that. The Utah Jazz are one of them, trading away Donovan Mitchell kind of out of nowhere, not entirely, but kind of, and getting the maximum value they could for him. Same thing with Rudy Gobert. But has that worked out for them just yet? Are they back in the playoffs? They're tanking and losing another year of Larry Markkinen, and I think they just got fined for that sort of thing because they're badly tanking in an aggressive way that should be, the NBA needs to step in more on that. So that's worth keeping in mind when it comes to kind of the trading Zion at the peak of his value conversation. Let's look at the other factors. That's just the reasoning behind why you would or maybe would not do it. That has nothing to say of, will the offers actually be good? And what could those look like? Let's discuss that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by TurboTax. Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. And then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. And now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worrying. Now, this is taxes. So get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money, but start building wealth. I started using this because I was curious about the app, and I realized just how much money I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save even more. And managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use Locked On NBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On NBA for half off your first year. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday, and let me know in the comments down below if you're an everydayer. Let me know what you think, trade Zion or not. We're going to go into some more things when it comes to this too, because look, when trading a player, it's not just in a vacuum. It's going to depend on what the returns could be too. And are they going to be that good for Zion Williamson? And I'm not entirely sure. And I'm going to explain why. Because you might be going, oh, I realized I forgot to, I'll change that later. And you might be going, wait, no, you just said he's kind of playing at the peak of his value here, right? Like, what's going on? And, well, while he might be, I think there's more factors into this. I'm going to actually upload the little side video or clip thing that I completely forgot to do. This is what happens when you're on the road. Here we go. So it's now good for the third segment. So, by the way, check out the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now over at lockedondaily.com. So let's get into this. Will the offers actually be good? So you're going to be going, Jake, you just said he's playing his best. The value's at an all-time high. It is. Doesn't mean the offers are going to be necessarily good for Zion Williamson, though. Go Google Zion Williamson trade. Google Zion Williamson trade and look at what the offers people are putting out there for him on the internet. From smart people, right? You don't want to just take random newsletters. They're not newsletters, but message board stuff, things like that. Will the offers actually be good? Keep in mind this offseason that Kevin Durant's likely going to be on the move. Maybe Devin Booker. Teams are going to try and pry him away there. There's going to be players traded more so than we saw at the trade deadline as teams look to get under the second apron, maybe dodge the luxury tax for the future, all of those things. That's going to complicate the market too. Houston is a team that feels like they need to make a move, a bigger splash. Could Zion Williamson fit in there? Absolutely, next to Alperen Şengün. But the offer is something like Jock Landale, Jabari Smith Jr., and maybe Reed Shepard or something along those lines. And while Reed Shepard was the 3rd overall pick, Jabari Smith Jr. was someone who was thought to potentially be the #1 overall pick. Shepard's barely played this year. Jabari Smith Jr. is fine. Not worthy of being, the #1 overall pick, not worthy of being the 3rd pick in that draft, pretty much. So when you look at this, does it, is that the trade you want? There's no picks in that deal that I saw over at Bleacher Report, right? That the trade you want? I don't think that that's going to be a deal most people would take, not for how well Zion is playing right now. So if the offers aren't good, well, that's going to be a problem. You could look at the Charlotte Hornets when it comes to it. I think they're a team that would make a lot of sense trying to pair LaMelo Ball and Zion Williamson together. But what's the deal going to be? Nick Mark Williams was just traded and rescinded because of the injuries that he has and things like that. So what's that deal going to be? I don't think you're going to get Brandon Miller back in that deal. One, he's out for the season, but he had been playing particularly well for them. So you'd be looking at Miles Bridges, who I don't particularly want, Grant Williams, and maybe a pick for Zion Williamson. That doesn't sound particularly appealing to me as a trade. So that's where you're looking at the market, and it complicates it. Detroit as a team, is a team that I said should have looked at Zion at the trade deadline. You're not getting Cade Cunningham, right? You could maybe get Tobias Harris, but Tobias Harris is scoring 14 points per game. Maybe, Malik Beasley, maybe a Jaden Ivey in there as they want to go younger, but you're not getting a Sir Thompson. You're not getting Cade Cunningham. Certainly if you want to get Jalen Durant, you can, but those aren't the most exciting type of deals, and you're not going to be getting like a bevy of first-round picks back in any sort of trade like that, right? Look, the reasons that we've talked about getting off of Zion Williamson, the other teams know that. Well, it's a risk to take him on, so we're not going to give you as much as you might like. Look, the Lakers didn't need to give up another first for Luka Doncic because they managed to convince Dallas that, there was a big risk here in trading for him because they were trying to trade him away in the first place, right? That's a factor into this, that everything we just said is not like unknown to other teams. So if that's going to be the case, you do risk other teams deciding not wanting to give you their best offer despite Zion Williamson, maybe being at the peak of his value now. So maybe it's better to wait a year or something like that, or just hold on to Zion Williamson in the first place. Now, you might have some desperate teams that missed out on Kevin Durant. So could you get in on one of those teams or start up trade conversations with one of those teams that doesn't get a Kevin Durant? The answer is yeah. And those teams might do it. And Durant, I don't think, is going to get the type of value that he would have gotten in the past couple of years for anything. So if that's going to be the case, maybe this is the move that you want to make to try and, just do something and build around Trey Murphy, build around whatever draft pick you get this year. And look, maybe this is all, based off of who you end up drafting. If you're in the top 3, top 4, I feel pretty good about drafting one of those guys, kind of making them the centerpiece, in the future of the team. Trey would be the centerpiece in the meantime, kind of the main guy going forward. But if you end up with the 7th pick, and you're looking at a nice piece, but not a guy that you feel you can build around going forward, that might be something that's worth, keeping in mind. Like on Tankathon, just because it's easy to pull up, Con Knipple is going 7th overall, and while I think he's going to be good, I don't view him as someone who is going to be like the franchise cornerstone that you'll win an NBA title with. So if that's the case, do you then keep Zion Williamson? But if you land the number 1 or 2 pick, Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, 2 guys I'm very, very high on, even 3rd with Ace Bailey, who would not fit next to Zion Williamson at all. We'll be doing that show in the near future. If that's going to be the case, cool, build around those guys. Look, you don't need to worry about Ace Bailey and Zion Williamson fitting if you trade away Zion Williamson at that point. Ace Bailey is very similar to Brandon Ingram, and we've seen that fit. We don't need to do that again. So if that's going to be the case and you trade Zion, then you can build around Ace Bailey and just do that instead. And so that makes it a little bit easier. But if you get 6th, 7th, something like that, I think that's something where you go, okay, we need to keep Zion. So the draft and the lottery, the lottery date essentially I think is going to be one of those things where it's really going to impact the Pelicans' future for a variety of different reasons, but also just what are they going to do going forward with everything? But I don't know if those offers are going to be as good as you might think they would for Zion Williamson, despite him playing well. It's still on minutes restriction. He's not playing back-to-backs. He could play back-to-backs. So there's still the potential that's going to be fun. They're doing like construction at my hotel, so that's what that noise is if you can hear it in the back. It might just depend on the offers. And look, all it takes is one team to decide to go all in and do the thing. I think the Warriors are not going to be in there now that they got Jimmy Butler with that. They're kind of removed from it. Is Zion's agency going to have any power over this and trying to kind of like steer him in a certain direction? Maybe, maybe not when it comes to it. Those are all factors into all of this that could complicate it a good bit. Does his contract complicate it? I want to kind of clear up 1 or 2 things when it comes to that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. I was like, keep coffee. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets here. So if you got your eye on a few underdogs, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game prompts, and more. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app is super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, that is FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Go check out Locked On Saints. They're being kind of aggressive. They're trying to compete for next year and kind of dig it, kind of don't. What should I believe? Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints making sense of everything. Black and gold, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we're talking about potentially trading away Zion Williamson here. And I want to look at one thing that I think is important, and that's his contract too, because a lot has been made over the guarantee triggers, things like that. What's guaranteed, what's not, fully guaranteed, not fully guaranteed. They could cut him, all those things. So one thing to keep in mind that unless basically like really written into the contract, all NBA contracts are fully guaranteed. So when you sign a $200 million deal over 5 years, you're going to get every penny of that. Even if the team cuts you, you're going to get every penny of that unless it's set in there that 1 or 2 years is like not guaranteed or a partial guarantee or something like that. So for the most part, it's just best to believe they're fully guaranteed. Zion's contract was a little bit weirder because there were triggers that kind of made it where it would be guaranteed, but then unguaranteed and all of that stuff, depending on his weight and games played and certain criteria. It's one of the more creatively built contracts probably in league history when it comes to it. You know, Joel Embiid had a similar one to that too, and part of Zion's is it becomes fully guaranteed if like his body fat and weight are below a certain number and all of that stuff. The way I've always described this was massively overblown and people tried to make this a very big story because the way that it's not like if he's a certain weight plus body fat and it's over that number that he gets paid less that year if he's on the team. As long as he's on the team, he gets every dollar of the 36.7 million he's making this year. Next year, even if the deal isn't fully guaranteed, if he's on the team at the end of the season, he will have made every dollar of the $39.4 million. It's not like, well, if you're overweight or whatever it is, you're going to get half the money in your contract. That's not how it would work. This only factors in if you were to cut him, if you were to waive him and make him a free agent, go like, well, it's not guaranteed. We don't need to owe you anymore. Goodbye. You're off the team. They could do that. And it was basically just an out that if he suffered so many bad injuries or had a situation where he just wasn't taking it seriously, wasn't playing, wasn't practicing those things, you could waive him and get out from just the problem that you had. But since he's been playing, since he's been on the team, this has never come into a factor. It probably never will become a factor. And I never really thought it was. So all the time spent on that, I always thought was overblown. The everydayers of Locked On Pelicans know this, right? It's just a waste of time to deal with all that other stuff. So there's that factor. I've seen a lot of people say, well, a team could trade him, and if it doesn't work out, you can just cut him. You could. Very much so. His contract, depending on the guarantees and things like that, and it's fully guaranteed right now, but that can change, could do that. So you could easily trade for him. And then, you know what? It doesn't work out. It doesn't clog our books. We'll be fine. Let's cut him. But here's the thing with that, right? You're not going to give up as good stuff. The offers are going to be less because that's the risk, right? This was similar to the Luka Doncic stuff, as weird as that was. When it comes to everything of, hey, yeah, the reasons you're trading him is the reasons it's a risk for us to take him on. So we're not going to include another first-round pick in that sort of thing. Right? The reverse would be, is kind of what it would be here, right? Another team's like, we're going to give you less because it is a big risk Just because you say you can waive him doesn't change that it's a risk in that we don't get the stuff back that we traded you, the players, the picks back that we traded you if that's the case. And that's certainly not what, the team trading for Zion Williamson would want. So just because you have his contract there doesn't mean that, that can get you out of it, doesn't mean that teams are going to give it to you. If there's a car that's value, it's worth $10,000, right? Everywhere, worth $10,000. That's what this car is. And you want to buy it. And they're like, oh, the engine, though, might blow up in a year. You're going to have to replace that. Are you going to give him $10,000? Or are you going to go find a $10,000 car whose engine won't blow up? You're going to be like, cool, I'll give you $5,000. So if the engine does blow up, I got my money to replace the engine and fix it or something along those lines. Not a perfect analogy, but you get what I'm trying to say right here. That's similar to Zion Williamson. Well, if the engine might blow up, we're not going to give you full value for it, right? There's a risk in that. Yeah, he's playing really well. He is. We see it. That's the dude that it looks like he can be number one on a championship winning team. You just don't find guys like that, very often in the league. If you look at the past, number one overall picks, right? Wemby is that guy, I think. But, is Zach Reshape going to be that? No. Even Paolo Banchero is maybe one of the better ones of the number one overall picks recently since Zion. He doesn't, at his best, reach Zion levels, in my opinion, of the way he just changes a game. Very good player, but not at that kind of level. So when you have someone like this, teams are going to be interested, but the risks associated with it are massive. And I think that will end up scaring a number of teams off when it comes to this sort of thing and trading for him. And it's going to lead offers to being depressed and not what you want. And then if you're not actually getting the most value for him, going back to what we talked about, in the first and second segment here, that if it's about value, well, the risks haven't been fully alleviated yet. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And frankly, I don't think we're going to really be having this conversation. As I said, he had this game against the Clippers where it's like, oh, yeah. I even joked on the show yesterday that I wasn't going to do the show, but I think it's an interesting discussion to get into the other specific details around all of this when it comes to Zion Williamson. Let me know what you think. You swayed one direction or another? You just want to hold on to him, or you're like, you know what? I just can't deal with this anymore. I want to root for a team with guys who play hard every game and play every game and not deal with, whatever off-season drama tends to come up. Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Sorry, it's out a little bit late here. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to recap the game.